Hello and welcome back to Salute Your Sports. Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman, ready for an awesome show. It's our NFL Draft Recap Show. The big story everybody's talking about, Shedeur Sanders, presumptive top 3 pick, slipping all the way down to the 5th round. We'll talk about some possible reasons as to why that happened. Was it fair? Is it justified? It'll be a very, very interesting debate when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. We'll also talk about some of the other best quarterbacks. Who's the best? Cam Ward? Is it Shedeur? Is it somebody else? We're talking about some of the best quarterbacks in, quite frankly, what is not the top-end quarterback draft, to be honest. Of course, we'll talk about the best overall player in the draft, regardless of position. We'll be talking about steals of the draft as well. And, of course, what team had the best draft of them all? I cannot wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing on this Wednesday night here? We're, about 4 days after the NFL draft. So a full recap on some of the biggest things that happened.
Yeah, definitely some time to digest, particularly with some big surprising news in the draft. I mean, right off the bat, there was that massive trade between Jacksonville and Cleveland. Jacksonville going up and getting their guy, Travis Hunter, a player that a lot of folks would probably say is the best player in the draft or would have him number one on the board. And we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. But we also kind of needed all 3 days to digest Shedeur Sanders' landing spot, as he ended up in a place where a lot of people had him probably mocked to the Cleveland Browns, but maybe a little bit different a route of getting there. There was some talk of, okay, maybe Cleveland trades back to pick Shedeur Sanders. As we were getting closer to the draft, it was maybe, okay, he might slip out of the first round, but then, Cleveland would just pick him up in the early second round, for example, with either their pick or that extra pick that Jacksonville had. But no, we're going to do a little bit of Dave Chappelle here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds until Shedeur Sanders was selected. And this is really, I mean, it's a fascinating story, I think, because of all of the rhetoric and around Shedeur Sanders and his pre-draft process. And I think that there's a lot of projection that is going into it. And for some reason, there are a lot of really, really hard feelings going on, too. I mean, Mel Kiper, I think, kind of took the weekend a little bit.
He's upset about the pick.
With how it was, like, all 3 days, to the point that it's like, hey, can we let a little bit of shine for maybe Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter, the actual top picks of the draft. So there's a whole lot going into this, and it's really difficult to try to parse through some things, but I've taken the days to kind of like see what sort of more level-headed, reasoned out information that I could hear. Kamen, what's some stuff that you've been digesting about Shedeur Sanders? What has caused the quote-unquote fall in the draft? And perhaps, is it fair to say that this even was a fall necessarily, considering that Shedeur Sanders did not participate in the Senior Bowl, did not participate in the draft combine, didn't really have a very serious pro day from what reports were from that? Is it possible that this is as simple as Shedeur Sanders opted out on the NFL, and so some teams opted out on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think none of all those things definitely did not help his case. They hurt his case. Usually a situation like this, I mean, if you look at this thing on social media, there's just so many different things being thrown out there. And usually when something like this happens, I cannot say 100%, with 100% certainty, but usually it's a mix of a little bit of everything. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Some of it is true, some of it is not. But both sides of the Shedeur Sanders story are kind of true. There's the one side where if you're the NFL general managers, the story's out there that he had a lot of bad interviews. He was a very cocky quarterback. He didn't do some of those draft activities some would do. There's a lot of stories about his father, saying that he will only play on a certain team. He'll pick where Shedeur goes. One thing I know about NFL owners, they love money and nothing is bigger than them. So I don't know if there's a general memo that's sent out, don't draft him. That might be a little bit of an overstep when it comes to rumors.
That would be legitimately illegal if that existed. Yes.
But when it comes to these general managers, these owners, these coaches, they want to definitely see They don't think any player is above their team, etc. The other rumor out there, though, if you want to go the opposite side, those people that say a confident black gentleman is too much for the NFL. They don't want to have a guy that is so like he's cocky. Sometimes cocky can be good. I mean, Michael Jordan was cocky. Anthony Edwards in the NBA is cocky. Just because you're cocky doesn't mean that you're a bad teammate or a bad player. But some folks, some people saying on the other side of it, saying that the NFL just, doesn't want to embrace a cocky African American guy. So, to me, it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I could definitely see that being partially true for some teams. I can also see the fact that he was too cocky. I mean, I don't care who you are, that will definitely hurt your draft stock. Also, one thing that maybe we haven't talked about, though, is did not have the biggest arm. He's got an okay arm, but he doesn't have first-round arm talent. But if you look at the accuracy, look at a lot of the other factors, he would definitely at least be a second-round quarterback talent-wise. But some teams don't want a second-round quarterback. Look, if you really believe in a quarterback, you really believe that that's the future of your team, you draft them in the first round. So all of a sudden, a guy that maybe is a borderline first round, second round talent, and all the whether it's prejudices or whether it's the actual truth of the cockiness and all these little things that add up, then it kind of maybe like you slip out of the second round. You go to the third round. You go to the fourth round. By the way, I'm not exactly sure what the Cleveland Browns are doing, just to clarify, because I don't actually mind the Shedeur Sanders pick because I think we can agree talent-wise, fifth round, he's worth a flyer. But they have 5 quarterbacks in their roster. If they're going to get Shedeur Sanders, you should have drafted him instead of Dylan Gabriel because they have Kenny Pickett. They have, I think, Joe Flacco is back. They still have Deshaun Watson. Yeah. Now they have Dylan Gabriel. Now they have Shedeur Sanders. And all those quarterbacks have just massive question marks. Obviously, you look at Deshaun Watson, not even close to the player he used to be, prior to all his off-field issues. Joe Flacco is literally an old man. Dylan Gabriel, again, talk about arm talent. Accurate guy, but arm talent, size, not there at the NFL level. You look at Kenny Pickett, obviously, talk about bad first-round quarterbacks. So I'm just a little puzzled why they have 5 quarterbacks on their roster. It feels like they're kind of throwing dartboards and hoping one of 5 sticks. And I'm not entirely sure any one of those 5 guys will stick, to be completely honest. And even if they were really good, I mean, the Browns, Jerry Jeudy's okay. All right, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, they're okay. But obviously the Browns don't really have the support system, the offensive line, the plethora of other options at receiver, etc. So I think, like I said, there might be a little bit of truth about being confident, African-American confident guy, but I think that was not the best look for Shedeur Sanders. I think he definitely could have been a little bit more professional. He could have been a little bit more humble. I think it is a learning experience for him. With that said, Tom, if you can play, you can play. The Cleveland Browns don't have a great quarterback on their roster. So if Shedeur Sanders is the best player at training camp, he will get his chance to start. He did lose a lot of money, obviously, slipping into the 5th round. But, as far as just the other question mark of it, like, is this fair? Is this warranted? I mean, he probably should have gotten picked earlier, if we're being honest. But I don't know that he's a first-round talent, though, because there is some legitimate arm questions. He took a lot of sacks. I would say more of that is the Colorado offensive line as opposed to necessarily him. But obviously, you got to get rid of the ball quick in the NFL. That's a question mark for him. Can you get rid of the ball quicker? So I would say he probably should have gotten drafted sooner, but I don't feel as passionate about it as Mel Kiper. I have no problem with him slipping out of the first round with some of the character question marks and as well as the arm talent question marks. I don't necessarily have an issue with it. And like I said, Tom, a lot of teams, like you draft the quarterback in the third, fourth, fifth round to be your backup. The second round's like a maybe. If you believe in the guy, you typically take him in the second round, which is, again, one of the biggest malarkey things I've ever heard in NFL history. The Patriots and Bill Belichick knew Tom Brady would be great. They would have drafted him in the third or fourth round if they were so sure he was going to be great. The Patriots got lucky with Tom Brady, and now the Browns are hoping they'll get lucky with Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah,
I think his peak, Tom. I know we'll talk about it in the next segment. I would say he's good enough to be an NFL starter, but if he's your starter, you're not going to be in the playoffs. I'll put it that way. Yeah. Barring something crazy happening with injuries, you put him together with the best teammates, etc. But he's not the guy I think of that's going to take my franchise and lead us to a playoff appearance and lead us into a Super Bowl contender type deal.
Exactly, and that drives right to the point, like the smallest of small quibbles that I have with what you said, where owners don't like players that are bigger than the team. They do if you're good enough. Yeah. We saw the Green Bay Packers, the New York Jets do all sorts of things for a later prime and then, frankly, post-prime Aaron Rodgers, and that was all accepted and considered above board and everything because of the talent that Aaron Rodgers has and that he's displayed. I think that,
but you saw a slight dip in talent, like you said. All of a sudden, they didn't want him. He was still good this last year, but he wasn't great. You got to be great to get past the side stuff. Good isn't good enough to get you a freebie to act like a prima donna type deal.
Exactly. And so in NFL teams' minds, Shedeur Sanders' talent did not outweigh the ancillary baggage, off-field, whatever you want to call it, because with him, frankly, there are no off-field issues in the way that we see with maybe some other players. I know one in particular they'll be mentioning a little bit later on in the show. I mean, NFL teams put guys that have, DUIs, DWIs, that have committed assault, battery, that have, weapons charges, what have you. Shedeur Sanders has done none of these things. He's done nothing that has been impugning of, a character, maybe football character, if you want to go to that point where, at times at Colorado, he was kind of throwing offensive linemen under the bus a little bit with talking to the media.
He's cocky, Tom. That's his big problem.
But Baker Mayfield, cocky, number one overall. I mean, NFL doesn't really have a problem with cocky. Caleb Williams, you could even say, was cocky. The difference from what I've been hearing from some folks that have been talking to teams, talking to scouts, is that if you compare, say, Caleb Williams, very, very cocky, he got to pick and choose what he wanted to do. But when he did do things, when he did do team interviews, he blew teams out of the water with his level of preparation and showing his acuity for the game. Whereas I believe this was from James Palmer, who does a podcast with Steve Smith, the former NFL wide receiver. Some of the things he was hearing, that Shedeur Sanders was treating this more of a recruiting trip than necessarily a job interview. And that was just the sort of thing that rubbed some teams the wrong way. And when you do throw in a little bit of that, specter of Dion, however real or imagined that is, there are a lot of teams that probably said, is it worth it? And if we turn on the tape and look at the talent, the answer is kind of sort of not really. So I think that's where it kind of falls with Shedeur Sanders. I think another issue is that he didn't have an agent hired. And part of an agent's job is that they will advise their client on, hey, this is roughly where you can expect to go. Without Sanders and his, camp having an agent, it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect between media and projection versus what NFL teams were actually
part
thinking.
of that too, Tom, is, again, the owners, the GMs, they like dealing with, agents. Say what you will, but Lamar Jackson didn't have an agent. And, we saw him not get picked. Think about all the teams that could have had Lamar Jackson a couple of years ago, Tom, that are regretting it.
I mean, there's
a kind of backlash if you don't have an agent. Yeah. Again, it comes back to the whole thing. Teams don't want somebody that's bigger than the team.
That's
if you're the best player in the league, that's different. But generally speaking, I would probably go by the book with something like this. Baker Mayfield, too. I mean, interesting you say that, because Baker Mayfield's a white guy, and Shadur's a black guy. So that's, again, is there a little bit of race there? There might be, honestly. Cam Ward's an African American and got picked first, but Cam Ward gives off a much more humble, quiet vibe than, Shadur Sanders does. One thing about
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield, though, if you listen to Baker Mayfield, his teammates love him. He seems to be a guy that really fights for his teammates. I don't know how many of Shadur Sanders' teammates necessarily per se love him.
Right.
The whole what's the movie? Draft Day. Bo Callahan, have you seen that movie? Nobody went to his birthday party or whatever.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
mean
if that's the case. I mean, Shadur and Travis Hunter seem to be tight, but I don't
sure.
know if those offensive linemen he threw under the rug might be tight with
Yeah,
him.
that's all stuff that's a lot of hearsay. And really, I mean, at this point, the NFL has spoken. The pick is what the pick is. But like we've already talked about with a couple of guys that we've already mentioned. I mean, you mentioned Tom Brady. We could even say Mr. Irrelevant a couple of years back. Brock Purdy. Where you get drafted at this point ceases to matter. Now it is what you do on the field, and if you can be about the work and the effort that it takes to get to that level to be perhaps the answer that your team is looking for to warrant a position going forward. So we'll see what Shooter Sanders does. I mean, he does factor into this next conversation of, looking at who are the best quarterbacks of this draft. I
It's
mean,
a
I
rough
think
draft, Tom.
it's a tough draft. Not the worst we've seen because, like you said, the Kenny Pickett year, where he was the first QB picked, and then
And
nobody
Malik
else was picked
Willis, I
until the
think.
third round. No, Malik Willis was a third round pick.
I'm saying, but like those were the two
Mhm.
biggest names. You might have slipped,
Yeah,
but those were the two biggest names in that draft, and obviously
yeah,
neither guy is very good.
maybe Matt Corral can be something
Oh,
or something along those lines. I mean, this is a draft where there's some opportunity. I mean, Cam Ward has as the number one overall pick in this draft, and let's give some good shine to him for there. Going from Incarnate Word to Miami and having a really really great season heading into the draft. He's in an opportunity where he has all the buy-in from a relatively new coaching staff because I believe it was last year was the first year for the new staff, so they inherited Will Levis. So this is their
and they
guy
had
that they're
enough.
going with. Yeah, they did. Yeah, not a whole lot of there. As we saw up front and personal with or up close and personal in that first game between the Bears and the Titans, and somehow Titans losing that game with a couple of gifts. But Cam Ward, I think he's probably going to be the best quarterback in this draft, if only because there's not really a ton of competition. I know that if you were to take this year's Cam Ward, I know last year he was kind of projected as like a third, fourth, fifth round pick. If you took this version of Cam Ward, plopped him into last year's draft, he's definitely going after Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, probably after, JJ McCarthy, probably
Drake
even
May.
after, yeah, Drake May. Thank you. I knew I was blanking on one guy. Drake May was up there. Like he's maybe in like that Bo Nix, Michael Penix type of range. But here he's one of one in this class. So I think that he's going to be the best. And he's got all the capital draft wise behind him, all the buy-in from the team. I think if there's anybody that I would say, I guess, is like second best because it almost is a little bit more intriguing, if you would, to say who's going to be the
Sure.
second best quarterback in this draft. Maybe not so intriguing when you say that he's the second quarterback taken, but I think Jackson Dart has an opportunity to do some things. I mean, from what I have understood, reading some of like the draft stuff on him, some of the projections, he's a good talent. It's just a matter of putting it all together. I mean, he was a good enough recruit to go to USC. Not good enough to stave off Caleb Williams, but again, Caleb Williams is considered a generational type of quarterback, so it makes sense that Jackson Dart left for some greener pastures. He also gets paired up with a coach, Brian Dable, who has at least a little bit of history in developing quarterbacks to be the best that they can be.
Speaking of busy quarterback rooms,
hmm I mean, that's an interesting one, but probably only for 1 year. And I feel like there's a decent like hierarchy. Dart's, I think, going to benefit from sitting behind Russell Wilson because Russell Wilson, is a professional quarterback. He is about the work. He is about the preparation. And Brian Dable did good work in kind of bringing out the most in Josh Allen and getting him to the point where he could then take off to that transcendent level of being, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. So I think that there's a good opportunity for Jackson Dart. They're building up a decent offensive line for the New York Giants. You throw in a top receiver like Malik Neighbors. There's enough pieces there that if he has a little bit of tutelage, sits for a year, just kind of absorbs some stuff, gets some osmosis, does the tape work, that maybe
Osmosis.
next year we could be talking about him as, okay, this is a viable NFL quarterback. Let's see what he can do in taking that next step forward and perhaps being second best or perhaps even pushing Cam Ward for best quarterback in this draft.
Yeah, look, when it comes to talent, if we were to get the most out of every quarterback, I actually would agree Jackson Dart would be the
Mm-hmm.
second most talented. It's between him and Shador, talent-wise. Uh, Jackson Dart gets the comp of Josh Allen. Best case, obviously, well, really, really best case. Really, really
Well,
best
of course,
case.
yes.
He also reminds me a lot of Anthony Richardson, though. A
Mm,
very inconsistent quarterback, a guy that has a lot of accuracy concerns. He was, by the way, on a very good college football team, a well-coached offense with Ole Miss. Uh, it's very hard to project to the next level, Tom, because Josh Allen did have some accuracy concerns as well out of college. But
sure.
from what I have seen of Jackson Dart, because I did actually watch a few of his games in college, and the games that I saw, I was not impressed. I think this kid, to me, is a lot closer to Anthony Richardson than Josh Allen, in that he could have some really, really good games, but he's going to have some really, really bad games as well. I look at him as more of like a Jameis Winston type. He's going to have some highs and some lows, but he's really, to me, ultimately a backup quarterback. I don't think this is a guy that's the future of your franchise. I just don't really like this draft at all. Like it's hard to say it's the worst draft because you brought up a pretty bad draft. There's been some really bad quarterback drafts, but this has got to be probably somewhere in the bottom 20, if not 10% of quarterback drafts. I think there's just a complete lack of talent in this class. I look at like Jalen Milroe's got so many question marks passing the ball. Dylan Gabriel was such a small guy. A lot of question marks about him. The Louisville quarterback, I believe, is like 50 years old or something. They got drafted early. It's not a very good quarterback class. I think Cam Ward is by far the best in this class. By the way, a zero-star recruit out of high school. I saw a little graphic that DJU, former, Clemson FSU guy that ended up being terrible this last year, five-star recruit. Cam Ward, zero-star recruit. Amazing how things can change. Cam Ward, though, I would say is like he's got a better than average arm, but it's not amazing. He's not a great athlete, but he's not no athlete. He's, a very, very prototypical, which by the way, an average starting quarterback is not a bad thing. If you're the 16th, 17th, 18th best guy in the game, he's going to play in the league long enough and he'll make enough money. But you know me, Tom. I love to proclaim guys. Russell Wilson, one I got right as a Hall of Famer out of college, one of my steals of the draft. Cam Newton, who I think would have been a Hall of Famer if not for injuries, one that I got right. I like to make early proclamations. I'm not making any in this draft. I'll put it that way. I don't think there'll be any gold jackets when it comes to quarterbacks. This is a pretty bad class. I think Shador Sanders will ultimately end up being the second best just because I'm not very high on Jackson Dart. I think there's so much inconsistencies there. I see him being kind of like a mess, more of like a Daniel Jones or a Jameis Winston, somewhere in the middle there. I see Cam Ward being like a solid quarterback. I think Cam Ward to me is like a Geno Smith, like, who a guy in the right organization, in the right fit, could be average to above average. I do think Cam Ward will struggle his rookie year. I really
Mhm.
do, just because Tennessee is a really, really bad football team. And that could potentially deter his career. I mean, some of these guys that start on bad teams, like Geno Smith, for example, if he didn't get lucky to get a chance in Seattle, which, by the way, our Mizzou guy, Drew Lock, was going to be the starter. He had COVID, open up the game for Geno
Mhm.
Smith. Geno Smith's got a solid career afterwards. That's the classic example of Cam Ward. He's about average. In the right system, he's above average. In the wrong system, he's below average. That's my only worry about him, is that he doesn't put up numbers. He doesn't win games because he plays in Tennessee of all places. So that could be kind of a negative knock on his career. But
Yeah.
Nobody in this draft I'm excited about. I will say Shador is the second best just because, just by default, really. Kind of like Cam Ward, too. Even though he's a decent player, he's kind of the best quarterback in this draft by default. I mean, you said it. You look at last year's class, there's 4, 5, maybe even 6 quarterbacks I will take ahead of him. I mean, I think given what Bo Nix and Michael Penix showed, he might be the 6th or 7th guy from
Right.
last year's class. So this is really a matter of sort of like the most okay or the least bad when it comes to quarterback names. But I do want to say Cam Ward seems like a really nice guy. He did have a guy that was not a big recruit out of high school. So to become the number 1 pick in the draft, that is very exciting. And I do wish him all the best. I think Tennessee, since Steve McNair went there, has had a lot of really bad quarterbacks, a lot of, hyped up guys. Mariota, you look at Jake Locker, you look at obviously Will Levis most recently. They've had a lot of quarterback issues, and I'm hoping that I'm a little bit wrong on Cam Ward. I'm hoping that he's a little bit better than I think. I mean, even if the Tennessee can get a mediocre quarterback, that would be considered a win, given some of the guys they've had in their team here in recent years. So wish Cam Ward all the luck. Just one name I'm hearing. If you want to have just now, I will say this: Jalen Hurts was a lot more accurate and a lot better at taking care of the ball than Jalen Milroe. But if I'm going to give you a sleeper just based on character, what I've heard, one of the most impressive interviews that was done by a quarterback was Jalen Milroe. I think it was the Seahawks. They asked him, what do you need to work on? And Jalen Milroe had a whole list of stuff. And they asked him, well, aren't you worried that you're telling us these things and it might keep us from not drafting you because of all these deficiencies? And his response was, look, I'm honest. And if you're, a young quarterback, you have a lot of stuff to work on. So he has a long way to go as a passer, but he's a phenomenal athlete. And if there's one guy that I would say could shock people in this class, just because from everything I've heard, everything I've read, he's actually a really hard worker, a really classy kid. So maybe he develops that talent as a passer that we haven't seen. Kind of Jalen Hurts-esque. I will again say Jalen Hurts, I would say, ahead of him, though, when he was as a prospect compared to where Milroe is. But that's my outside sleeper because obviously the kid can run. No doubt about that, Jalen Milroe. So wishing him the best as well.
Indeed. Well, we've talked about the best of the quarterbacks, and like we said, it's kind of a tepid category at best. Let's talk about, this has been a really, really interesting draft. Perhaps not as, wowzer talent, again, like we had last year, the past couple years, perhaps, but I think that there is an opportunity for an all-time great talent in this draft, and I'm going to go with a very, very easy, very, very popular pick in Travis Hunter if I'm saying who's a guy who's going to be the best player that comes out of this draft. And that's because
I've got him number 3 best case on my board, by the way, just so you know. So we'll disagree here.
I mean, he's on the verge and capable of doing something that we haven't seen perhaps in our lifetimes, where Jacksonville said he's going to be full-time receiver and kind of spot playing cornerback a little bit. I would actually almost flip that because I feel like it's a lot easier to learn a couple of packages, a couple of route trees as he's an offensive player.
If you look at what he did in college, I think he's a better corner than he is receiver, personally.
Yeah, and the fact that he could be a legitimate Pro Bowler on either side of the football means that just on pure talent, pure ability, he's, the best player in this draft. I'd have to go back to a book that I remember reading as a kid. It was an old book. It was about football players that were done playing before, my parents were married type of guys. And one guy that just kind of sprang to my mind as an example is a guy by the name of Chuck Bednarik. He played for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons back in the 1960s. And he was a guy that was a lineman. And I say lineman without a prefix distinction because he played both offensive and defensive line. And even when it was time for special teams, he would just stand out on the field and wait for the rest of his teammates to come out. Like somebody that legitimately was a Hall of Fame NFL player on both sides of the ball. I mean, there's not a single offensive or defensive lineman in the NFL today that I could imagine being an equally talented pass rusher as well as a pass protector. And yet we're looking at Travis Hunter, somebody that can do, be a pass catcher and a pass defender, or on defense, you also want to catch the ball as well. I think that we've got an opportunity to see something truly unprecedented, similar to, to borrow a little hyperbole from Andrew Berry of the Cleveland Browns, a Shohei Ohtani-esque player. I mean, we look at Shohei Ohtani and it was, okay, Babe Ruth is really the only comp, and that's, black and white, Great Depression as the last player that was really a qualified, bona fide pitcher and a Hall of Fame hitter as well. We've got a similar level of unicorn, if you will, with Travis Hunter, which is why I think that he's the best football player in the draft. If you want to go straight up productivity at a given position, I could absolutely buy, say, Abdul Carter for the New York Giants, because he's probably the best defensive, or not probably, was absolutely the best defensive lineman and edge rusher, and that's a really, really important position. So I could see that argument, but if I'm going to say, okay, who's the best football player, I'm going somebody who can do both sides of the ball at an elite high level.
Yeah, I think the Travis Hunter both sides of the ball is a very intriguing thing. Mm-hmm. I think it remains to be seen how good he's going to be on both sides of the ball. I personally think he's a good corner and a good receiver, and he becomes into a pretty good football to very good football player because he does both. I don't personally see him as elite in either. I definitely think he could be above average in both. But like in terms of like when I hear best player in the draft, the first thing I think of is this guy an all-pro? Is he a first team or second team all-pro? Is he top two in his position? I personally, just based on what I've seen both in college, his size as well, not a very big guy. Again, like I don't know if he's big enough to play receiver against, successfully in the NFL personally. So like at an elite level, he's good enough to play. He could be a really good slot receiver. Obviously, if you weren't talented enough, you wouldn't be the second pick in the draft. Right. But in terms of good enough to be warranting a second pick in the NFL draft, because I look at it this way. If he was just a corner or just a receiver, to me, I'm looking at mid to late first round pick personally. I think it's the intriguing part of doing both. I think it's almost like kind of like a quarterback situation. Like teams will draft the quarterback too early because they're afraid of missing out on the quarterback. They're afraid of missing out on this, as you said, Shohei Ohtani-esque, once-in-a-lifetime talent. I think his best case is to do something like Deion Sanders did briefly with the Niners, where he was mostly a corner, but he played a little bit of wide receiver. He did some returning of kicks and punts as well, but I don't buy him being full-time receiver and corner in the NFL. I think he's going to get too beat up to do that. So I'm looking at the most dominant players in the draft. Like if I was drafting based on pure talent, there's two guys that put, for me personally, clear ahead of him. Abdul Carter, I think, is the number one pick in this draft talent-wise. And you know me, Tom, a lot of times we forecast to the next level. When I'm looking at guys, my favorite type of prospects are the guys that, A, have the physical tools of the next level, the potential, but B, guys that also produced at the college level. Abdul Carter had 24 tackles for loss last year, led the nation, first-team All-American. He also had 12 sacks. And what's great about him, if you watch his tape, if you read about him, watch his highlights, he's the Tyreek Hill of pass rushers in that he's quick and fast. Because there's the football quick and a little quick move. Can you quickly spin? And there's just the straight line speed, what I call fast. This guy is quick off the line and he's fast, which is a scary combination. I think Abdul Carter, to me, is the best player in this draft. And then actually my second best player in the draft is actually Will Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU. The guy's been a top offensive lineman literally his whole life. He was a massive high school recruit, number one player in Louisiana, one of the top ranked linemen out of high school. He's kind of like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar type in that, he's not this latecomer like Cam Ward. This guy was supposed to be really good out of high school, 5-star recruit, A-graded, 90-something rating, and then he delivered it. He went to college and he backed it up. So he was the 4th overall pick. Definitely a guy that I think is, for me, the second best player in the draft. And selfishly, I'm hoping that our Mizzou guy, Armand Membo, who was the 7th pick, had all sorts of combine records for biggest weight guy to do the fastest time, ran faster at the combine than Jameis Winston did, by the way, for tracking numbers. So I'm not going to put him, ahead of those two guys. I don't know if I would put him ahead of Travis Hunter, but he's the 7th pick in the draft. He's got a lot of potential, a big guy that can run, athletic guy, and hoping big things for him, just strictly as a Mizzou guy myself, Tom. But I would definitely say, to me, it's Abdul Carter is 1, Will Campbell is 1A, and then after that, I would say, to me personally, there's a pretty clear drop-off. That gold jacket I'm talking about, those are two guys that might put that gold jacket on. My early prognostications, Tom, predictions when it comes to those two.
See, I could see Travis Hunter getting a gold jacket for kind of like the Terrell Davis type of career, where it's like it's short, but it's fantastic. Where he's going to have I think he's going to have an early peak because, like you're saying, 17 NFL games and
over 10 years. With how skinny he is.
Over the course of his career, it could go up to 18 games at some point. That's something where I think early on, Jacksonville would say, hey, on this rookie contract, we're just going to get the most that we can. I think he's got the athleticism and he's got the skills to be able to play at a really high level. And if he can do that for the first, 4, 5, 6 years of his career, for a player like that, longevity might not matter quite to the same extent. And I could see him getting a gold jacket as well. But I think those are probably, I would agree with you, it's like the two most likely. Abdul Carter is probably the most likely for the gold jacket from like that full career and him being able to stick around for a long, long time. We'll see how everybody else shakes out. Also, Armand Membu and Luther Burden, of course, a couple of Mizzou guys that one more than the other we're hoping is going to be made good in the NFL, which might kind of sort of tie us in potentially to our next topic, which is steals of the draft. This is where everybody likes to congregate after the draft has happened, say, oh, well, I had this player pegged here, but he slid all the way to this team here, or this player ends up in an ideal situation where it's a perfect fit for this player and what this team needs. So that clearly is a steal because that player is going to jump out to some early and sustained success. So, Kamen, do you have, who are your players that you have as steals of the draft? I have two names, and then I kind of have like a cloud, if you will, of steal, of thievery that has gone on in the draft.
Yeah. Well, I have 3 names written down. First off, just to clarify, I think Abdul Carter and Will Campbell, both 3rd and 4th respectively, could be steals of the draft, but I don't count that steal of the draft because it's such an early pick.
Sure, yeah.
I'm going to save my number 1 steal of the draft for my 3rd one. Okay. And it's going to be a guy that I think, I cannot believe he got drafted this low. I'll put it this way. I knew he was going to based on projections. Where he went is where he was projected, roughly give or take, but he should have been much better. So my number, first of 3 steals, my number 3 best steal of the draft, I'm going to go late first round, 19th overall, Emeka Buka out of Ohio State. He's a really good receiver, put up 10 touchdowns, more than 1,000 yards his last year at Ohio State. We have this awesome tradition of Ohio State receivers. I think a lot of his numbers were taken away by the young, freshmen as well on his team, not to mention 2 really good running backs at Ohio State, the really good defense. They're up big in so many of these games. He may not be the fastest guy. He may not be the strongest guy. but he's like a very reliable possession receiver. Like, I'm talking about a guy that really, really moves the chains for you. Whether that's Hall of Fame or not, I think he's going to be, borderline that range. He may not be the sexiest guy, but he's a guy that's going to be very reliable. I kind of look at him as like a sure thing. You're not gonna. He's not going to be a bust. He's going to be really, really solid, very, very reliable. A guy that'll put up 1,000 yards, kind of like a Wes Welker. In his prime. Really, really good player. May not blow you away, but you knew you were going to get catches, first downs. That's what this guy does out of Ohio State. My number 2-1, I'm going to go homer here. Luther Burden out of Mizzou. At one point last year, I'm talking about like last year, his previous year at Mizzou, he was being mocked as a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. That is how talented he is. His player comp is Deebo Samuel. A lot of the gadgets. He's fast. He's strong. He's got good hands. Can do a little bit of everything, running, receiving. He had a little bit of a disappointing year this last year at Mizzou. Mm-hmm. The numbers were not quite there. I don't know if it was just so much hype. Everyone focused in on him. I can tell you, based on a couple games, I watched a lot of Mizzou games. There were a couple of big plays he had that got wiped off due to penalty that was not his fault. But, he slipped, and he probably should have slipped based on his projection. But I think based on his talent, his hard work, everything he does, this kid is a super, super talented player. He's a first-round talent. My only concern about him is that he went to the Bears. And I don't know if the Bears will have enough time to throw him the ball with the porous offensive line that they didn't get in the first round or the second round with their first 2 picks. So I actually look for him maybe to go to another team later on in his career and really kind of shine there, Luther Burden. But then my number 1 steal of the draft, remember this name right now, Tom Casselman.
I think I know where you're going, but go ahead.
What do you think I'm going to go with?
I think you're going to go with offensive tackle. That's right. Oh, no? Okay, well then color me surprised.
I'm going sexy with this one.
Ooh.
I'm bringing sexy back. I'm bringing the running back position back. Remember the name, Travion Henderson. Now, this guy is an absolute superstar. Ohio State had 2 really good running backs last year. One of them had way more yards per carry with the exact same offensive line. Travion Henderson is super fast. He can catch the ball. He's strong. Tom, he got 7.1 yards per carry last year. He had 6.4 yards per carry in his career. Ohio State had a lot of good running backs while he was there. None of them were as efficient as him. More than 1,000 yards last year, a second-round pick. He's going to have Will Campbell blocking for him, by the way. We'll be talking about, best drafts. Oh, my God. Are the Patriots back or are the Patriots back? Holy cow. They got a home run in this last year's draft. Travion Henderson, terrific running back. He's going to have as good, if not a better career than Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty got picked 6th overall. Travion Henderson got picked 38th overall. I put him in that same category. For me, the same talent level. I don't get it. I don't get it. This guy is super talented. I don't see how he got picked that late. If Ashton Jeanty got picked 6th, which I might argue was a little bit high for him, but if Ashton Jeanty got picked 6th, and I have Travion Henderson on that same level as him, and he got picked 38th, just saying. Talk about a guy that might put on a jacket one day, make multiple Pro Bowls. 38th overall pick, Travion Henderson. That's my steal. Biggest steal of the draft.
I would not have minded in the slightest if picks 38 and 39 had been flipped in this draft, and Luther Burden ends up in New England as a top pass catcher for Drake May, and Travion Henderson ends up in Chicago as the new RB1 for the Bears. I would have very much liked that. So I'll save, because I've got this name written down for the next section for the player that I thought you were going to say was a big steal. But I have a couple few on my end, and actually the last grouping obviously is going to tie in with your last pick. I think Will Johnson, a cornerback out of Michigan,
Yeah.
really, really good corner, was a huge part of that defense winning the national championship a couple years back for Michigan. Had a couple of injuries this past season, so he's one of those players that had like a clear first round grade. Like just about every scout, every person that does draft rankings, I'm very partial to Dane Brugler and the Beast, which you can find on the Athletic. Had him as a very, very highly ranked player who fell into what, like the 40s, give or take, with the Arizona Cardinals, and ends up in that position I was talking about leading into the segment of great player that falls to a
Yeah.
situation that needs him implicitly.
I'll
So
be talking about him actually
Mhm.
in the next segment. The Cardinals had a good
Yeah,
draft, but go ahead.
yeah, like I thought he was a steal, absolutely. Arianti Ursary, the now Houston Texans tackle out of Minnesota. I really would have liked the Bears to have picked him up at 41, seeing that he was available.
Uh-huh.
You know, big player,
Mm-hmm.
athletic player, plays left tackle. Ozzy Trapillo might very well be an answer of some kind for the Bears that might be moving Darnell Wright around. But that was a player that I kind of looked at and said, I think that I would like to have him helping fortify this line. But
Mm-hmm.
goes to a situation that also needed a lot of offensive line help in the Houston Texans, where we saw some issues with them last season with protection. They addressed getting some more pass catchers through the draft, and then trading Laramie Tunsil to get some draft capital back to restock the larder, if you will. They did very well for getting Ariante Ursary. And then the last group, it's a little bit of a cheat. You said Travion Henderson, but I would say almost any running back that you pick in this draft class, you could consider to be a bit of a steal because there were so many talented running backs that guys that might have been on pure talent graded as like round 3, round 4 guys ended up going in the 5th and 6th rounds. Dylan Sampson going to the Cleveland Browns. You have oh I for,
Skidaboo.
Scatabo, 4th round to the Giants. Devin Neal out of Kansas had a very, very good year for the Jayhawks. Ends
Just
up
as
going
a Zoo
6th
fan. That's the
round.
reason I
Oh
said I have
yes,
nothing against them.
yeah, but like going 6th round to the New Orleans Saints. I mean, just about any running back, like I said, that you're looking at has a chance to be a really good impact player for a pretty decent amount of time. And there's been this kind of drought, if you will, of like really, really good running backs. We've had some, high end guys like Jameer Gibbs and Saquon Barkley coming in, but the NFL's kind of been lacking a little bit in some of these, day 2 and day 3 guys showing up and really being solid players and role players for their team. Occasional Pro Bowls are going to be in there as well because you do have a couple running backs that can make the Pro Bowl. And just unfortunately, with the position, there is some attrition, there is some injury to it. So different guys are going to be popping off for different portions of their career. So I feel like if you're a team that was able to pick up a running back, you probably got good value for who you were getting there. And speaking of value, that's going to tie in perfectly to some of the teams that we feel had the best drafts. And I mean, I'm probably going to steal your thunder with the first one that I'm going to mention.
The
Um,
Patriots or the
not
Cardinals?
not the Patriots, actually. I think that the Chiefs did a pretty
I
decent
have
job
that
for
too. I have them
themselves.
written down as well.
Yeah, Josh Simmons. I thought that the tackle out of Ohio State, I thought he was going to be your sleeper pick because
That's a good one.
he was
32, baby.
a pretty good offensive tackle. If he didn't have injury issues, probably would have gone up in that like Will Campbell, Armand Membu, Calvin Banks area as being like a top 10 to 15 pick. Chiefs at a position need get a little bit of help there. Who are some of the teams, Kamen, that you have on the best drafts of the year? Because I've
Yeah,
got, I'd
probably.
say probably 2 others I like and a few honorable mentions. Or
Yeah,
2 honorable
probably
mentions.
Josh Simmons. I probably should have had as a steal of the draft, like you mentioned. Kind of slipped a little bit lower. The Chiefs getting lucky to get him.
Mm-hmm.
At work, or my work show, the customers asked me, "What did you think about the Bears and Chiefs draft after the first round?" This was night one of
Sure.
the draft, and my initial thought was, the Bears are a dumb organization and the
Ah,
Chiefs are a smart organization, because I only wanted one thing and one thing only from both the Bears and Chiefs in the first round. And that thing was the same position: offensive line. No matter who the Bears drafted, no matter who the Chiefs drafted, I was going to be upset with the draft pick unless it was an offensive lineman. That's all I wanted, Tom. The only thing I wanted, both those teams, their biggest need was offensive line. The Chiefs as probably the best organization in football. Although I'll say this, with the recent drafts and moves, the Eagles are definitely, putting that, to the test. But if not the best organization in football, certainly a top 2 or 3 organization in football, they know what they're doing. They drafted Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, such a great pickup. Got some more pass rushing help in the later rounds as well. They saw what happened in the Super Bowl. You win the game at the line of scrimmage. The Bears can go out there and draft as many tight ends as they want and reach. They can draft even the Mizzou guy that I want to desperately like. But I'll be honest, if it was another receiver in that spot, I would say the same thing. I'm angry, Tom. The Chiefs did a great job because they took care of the offensive and defensive line. They got the quarterbacks, healthy Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Travis Kelce. The weapons are not the problem. Just got to give the quarterback time to throw the ball. So excellent job to the Chiefs. Definitely the best draft for me, hands down, is the Patriots. I mean, I think Will Campbell is going to be a future, all-time great offensive lineman. They got their quarterback, Drake Mason, protection. They got him Travion Henderson, my steal of the draft at running back. In the 3rd round, they got Kyle Williams at wide receiver. 4th round, center out of Georgia. I look at it this way, Tom. You're not going to hit with every draft pick you're going to make. But I am a firm believer in the NFL draft. One of the main things I look at for teams, did you at least try to address a position of need? The Patriots right now, they have a solid defense. Their defense is not great. It's not bad. Christian Gonzalez is a young talent. They're solid on defense. Their offense is bad. They have a guy that they believe in as a quarterback who's really, really talented in their eyes. We'll see. I'm still 50-50 on Drake May, but they did what they could to get their quarterback help. Got an offensive lineman, got a running back, got a wide receiver, and another offensive lineman. Their first 4 picks helped the quarterback. They got to get some receivers. Maybe that's the next step next year. Free agency, draft, trades. They got to get some more. But they helped out their quarterback. Got a receiver, though. One of those picks was a receiver. So the Patriots, based on need, did a terrific job in the NFL draft for me. They were the best pick in the draft. Best picks overall, no doubt. I think the Cardinals did really good. Another thing, some people will hate me for saying this, Tom, but if you're just randomly throwing darts at, which is what the Browns are doing, but they're not doing it well, call me a big school guy, whatever. Look, the Cardinals got some guys from a lot of big schools. I'm looking at the blue blood names. They got, you mentioned their cornerback out of Michigan. They got the Ole Miss tackle as well. Got an edge rusher from Oregon. They actually got 2 stars from Ohio State who just won the national championship, by the way. So they got a lot of defensive guys. Obviously, we know they got Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. They're pretty solid when it comes to tight end. McBride is really good. They got a running back. Kyler Murray, I think, could be a good quarterback. I think that's a guy that we're sleeping on. The Cardinals had a really, really bad defense last year. And same thing, they went and got themselves some cornerbacks, some pass rushers, some dudes that fit what they need to do from blue blood teams, Tom. Call me biased, call me whatever. They got some blue blood talent on that Cardinal team. Mentioned the Chiefs, mentioned the Patriots. The Jackson Dart could be a reach. It's worth a shot. I would argue that I got to put the Giants up there for best draft only because of getting Abdul Carter. I think he's a number 1 pick talent. I think there's a lot of drafts that he would go first overall. I think that a lot of people, including yours truly, very enamored with Travis Hunter playing 2 positions. Obviously, everyone gets enamored with the quarterback spot. But when I look at Abdul Carter, there's two words that come to mind, Tom. Sure thing. That's what I look at him. Sure thing. The Giants have a long way to go as an organization. They have a long way to go. They have a lot of holes to fill, but they got themselves a sure thing. The Giants are known for good pass rushers. I'll say that. They have Kayvon Thibodeau as well on the roster. Those two guys together could
Brian
be
Burns.
really, yeah, Brian Burns. So all of a sudden they could be kind of a nightmare for some teams, at least on the defensive, end linebacker pressure spots. I mean, it's ironic because they're so used to getting pressured themselves because they do need some massive offensive line help, but at least they'll do it on the other side. So imagine being a Giants offensive lineman, as bad as you are, you face those good guys in practice, then you face all the other guys in the games.
Like, oh, it's not so bad.
So just saying. But I think again, I'm up and down on Jackson Dart. I don't love that pick. I don't have anything that I'm super excited about or upset about the Giants the rest of their draft. But I think they got the best player overall at number 3. And anytime you get the best player overall at number 3, I would say that qualifies as a really good draft.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that there's a couple of the teams, and I'm actually going to dip into the bottom end of the draft. And there's no surprise because I really like these teams overall anyway. But there's a little bit of a theme with these 3 teams that I'm picking. I already mentioned the Chiefs a little bit, and the theme is that when you're a really good team, when you're a really good organization, you can just take advantage of whatever good players fall your way because other teams might be drafting because they need to have an offensive tackle, they need to have a receiver, need to have a quarterback. I really like what the Baltimore Ravens did picking up Malachi Starks out of Georgia. It's really difficult to go wrong taking a star level Georgia Bulldog in the first round of the NFL draft. And the Ravens picking up Starks to pair with Kyle Hamilton at safety, that allows them to do a lot of really cool and interesting things with the back end of their defense. And then you want to talk about an organization being able to withstand some perhaps off-field character issues. Mike Green was considered one of the top pure pass rushers in this draft coming out of Marshall. A little bit smaller school. There are some concerns about the level of competition at which he was playing, but as far as the skills, the speed, the athleticism that he has, some folks would say talent-wise, he's second only to Abdul Carter, but because of the smaller school and because of some of those off-field concerns that he had, some legal issues, he fell in the draft. And the Ravens said, "Hey, we've got a good culture. We have a really strong head coach. We have a veteran-led defense and a veteran-led locker room. We can kind of absorb a younger, talented player that might have, need some helping to pen into the straight and narrow, if you will, and get a really talented football player in the process." I also think that the Philadelphia Eagles, coming fresh off a Super Bowl, did really, really well for themselves. They got the top off-ball linebacker in Jahad Campbell from Alabama. Again, difficult to go wrong with a big school, a big defense, top star
They
player.
like those SEC guys over there at Georgia, right?
They really, and hasn't really steered them wrong. They also, they just added up and down the draft as well with the defensive side of the ball, which makes a lot of sense when you consider they've drafted really, really well on the offensive line over the past few years. They have a couple of receivers and a quarterback and a running back locked into some long-term security. So it was a team that said, we don't necessarily need to add at the top end of our offense. Let's keep supplementing that defense because as much as the Eagles put up 30-plus points on offense, they got a defensive touchdown and they really got after the Chiefs and made it difficult for the Chiefs to do much of anything, which kind of allowed the Eagles offense to kind of take whatever the Kansas City defense gave them and winning the Super Bowl. So the Eagles doubling down on the strategy that's gotten them to this point, which is just invest high draft capital in your defense, and it's really hard to go wrong there. A couple of just honorable mention shout-outs, and this is more from the perspective of doubling down on your biggest investment. I understand completely, and I feel exactly where you're coming from with the Chicago Bears. I've already griped and nitpicked about what they've done, but if we're looking at the Bears and the Jaguars as two teams that said, hey, we need to give our quarterbacks as much to work with as we can possibly afford them, I think that those teams did pretty okay with getting an extra tight end and an extra receiver in the Bears' case, getting Travis Hunter in Jacksonville's case to say, okay, we've invested in these top quarterbacks, probably the two most recent generational talents, if you will, as far as quarterbacks that are considered to be like one of one in their draft classes. I mean, we'll see if those moves work out, but I think at least the intent and the goal of building up around those guys isn't terribly misguided
That's fair.
for Jacksonville and Chicago.
I,
So
I do think the Bears need to get Caleb Williams some offensive line help. I
I
know they got Humphrey in the
100%
offseason. I
agree.
know there's other guys they got.
Sure.
But to me, Tom, an offensive line is more than one or two guys. It is five-man deep. And you
Hmm.
could almost like, even if you did make one or two moves in the offseason, if you're coming off allowing the most sacks in the league, it
Yeah,
never hurts to get a first or second round offensive lineman, which is
I'm
what the
right there
Bears
with you.
failed to do. I guess, did they
That's
get a late second round lineman? Or was that third? I think they got one late in
Ozzy.
the second
They got
round.
Ozzy Trapillo out of Boston
Boston
College, like
College.
a 6'8", like
But
340-pound tackle who played left and right side.
that was late second round, right? Or was that third
It was
round?
late second round,
It
and
was
then I
their
think it
third pick
was
overall. They went tight end,
fourth,
receiver, and then late second round offensive
and then
line.
fourth round. I believe his name is Newman out of Michigan State. He was another
Yeah.
offensive tackle that they picked up, but again, a little bit late. That's where you're kind of
You could have
hoping that
got
your
those like
coaching
a
staff,
better player in the first or second round is my uh, I
I
don't
agree
hate the Luther
100%.
Burden as much for the second round. I just did not like the tight end pick. And I know
Yeah.
Ben Johnson schemes and throws the two tight ends. I've already heard this. I'm not blind to it, Tom. I also know that the Bears have an above average tight end, Cole Kmet. It is definitely not a position of need.
Hmm.
And I think if you're going to draft somebody in the top 10, unless this guy is a generational player, if this guy is the next Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, Tony Gonzalez,
We
Antonio
can only
Gates,
hope.
then you draft him. If he's not that good and you already have an above average tight end, just makes me shake my head. I absolutely hated the Bears' first pick,
Mm.
Tom. Nothing against the guy. I hope to God I'm
Yeah,
wrong. But just from a sheer like need of what they need, I did not like that pick.
it took some getting acquainted, if you will, a little bit of homework from me on that one.
Yeah, Ben Johnson and his two tight end scheme.
Yeah. Well, we don't have this on the docket, but would you like to humor me with a little bit of trivial fun?
Yes, I
All
would
right.
gladly. I never say no to trivia, Tom.
So this isn't, well, it's not necessarily a straight up and down trivia question. This is more just do you want to feel sad and old tonight? And the answer is you
You
don't.
had me started, and now I'm not so sure, Tom.
Well, the
I'm not
answer
so
is
sure anymore.
you don't really
But
have a
sure,
choice unless you want to end the stream now. So you
no.
mentioned already that the New Orleans Saints selected a 50-year-old quarterback, but really he's 25 going on 26, in Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. And a little note, a little tidbit
Brandon
that I
Weeden.
saw, not Brandon Weeden, no. Shuck is very probably the last player who will be drafted that was born in the 1900s. The last
Oh,
player selected who was born in the 20th century.
oh.
More likely than not, it's going to be everybody was born year 2000 or later going forward in the NFL
Oh,
draft. So it's a little bit of trivia knowledge if it ever pops up. Is like, oh, who was the last player?
this does not make me feel good, Tom. You just made my night get worse. Thank
um,
you. Thank you for that.
let's tie it in. Do you want to? Here's the trivia question.
Okay.
Tyler Shook most likely the last player from the 20th century to be drafted. Can you tell me the first player who was drafted in the 20th century? And that's, of course, the first player who ever got drafted in the NFL, as the first NFL draft took place in 1936 at a Ritz-Carlton hotel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Do you
Y.A.
know?
Tittle.
Not Wyatt Tittle. No, he was like 50s or 60s. No, the first player ever to be drafted. I'm just going straight to Wikipedia here. I just
Sid
thought this was a
Luckman.
lot of fun. A player by the name of Jay Berwanger,
Okay.
who had previously been awarded the initial Heisman Trophy.
Oh,
So he's got some bona fides.
sure.
But plot twist for the first player who was ever drafted in the NFL, never played in the NFL. His
Oh,
rights were traded from the Philadelphia Eagles to the Chicago Bears as the
okay.
Eagles felt they were unable to meet his reported demand of $1,000 per game.
I was going to say back then the NFL didn't pay,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of guys
Not
didn't want to play in the NFL.
exactly. George Halas of the Chicago Bears was unable to convince him to sign with Chicago. So after getting drafted to the NFL, not playing a single down, he got a job in rubber sales.
Rubber sales.
Yeah. So
I
Riley
bet he made
Smith,
more money.
possibly Riley Smith, the second player, was the first player to play after being drafted into the NFL. So a
Wow, how
little
about
bit of
that?
trivial knowledge there.
All
So
right. Well, I will keep that in the back pocket. Should I need it in a random
you're gonna
conversation,
forget it
which
because it makes
which
us
which
feel bad.
I do need that at work, and obviously, me, like any 30-something-year-old gentleman, loves to have random sports facts to just get out of their pocket. I would not preface it by talking about the last pick in the century. I'm just going to go old school, and I'll say, do you know your sports history? I will leave out all the make me feel old type stuff, Tom.
But
That is for sure.
yeah,
So,
Jay Behringer, I guess is how you'd say the name. Oh, he's from Oak Brook, Illinois. How about
how
that?
about that? Right next to me, Elmhurst, where I
Yeah,
was, grew up, Tom, right down the road.
went to Chicago University,
Okay.
Dubuque High School.
Okay.
Wow, I did not know that
That's my
he was
boy.
a local guy. Yeah,
My
first
boy.
Heisman. Like, yeah, there's a lot of history with Behringer there. So yeah,
the more you know.
there we go.
All right, well, Tom, I think that puts a good cap on our show. I got to go cry
Indeed.
my eyeballs out about the Inter Miami and Warriors games not
Oh,
going my
that.
way.
I thought
But
you were
we'll
going to
talk
cry
about
about
this in
being
the weeks to
old.
come. My Western Conference Finals is alive. I have the Nuggets versus the Warriors, and you have the
Hmm.
Thunder versus the Timberwolves,
Timberwolves,
right?
yes, sir.
Can I just make a quick comment? I know we'll save NBA for the next show.
Yeah.
I am starting to regret my Nuggets over Thunder pick. I'm going to put it that way. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to hope for the best. I still feel good about the Warriors making
Mhm.
the NBA Finals and winning them. Tonight's been an off night. Playoff leadership, experience, Butler, Curry, Green. I think they can beat the Thunder or the Nuggets, but if I had a mulligan, I would possibly pick the Thunder over the Nuggets in the next round. Possibly. But
Possible.
that'll be a dogfight to say the least. And maybe, just maybe, the Lakers can make a crazy comeback. We'll see. It starts tonight. We'll see. Luka better strap up and play some defense. Strap up, Luka. D up. But more fun to have in the weeks to come. I imagine we'll be dipping into some NBA playoff talk, among other things.
Mhm.
Tom, as always, a pleasure doing the show with you. Enjoyed the NFL draft recap. Kind of makes you want to have NFL season, come up soon. Obviously, I love all sports.
Mhm.
Huge basketball fan, huge soccer fan. There's not a sport I don't love. But in terms of weekly topical sports podcast, talking NFL is a lot of fun.
Oh
Regular
yeah.
season NFL beats any other sport when it comes
Mhm.
to regular season, at least.
Yes.
Playoffs are great in every sport. I mean, all sports are great all the time. I can, if I could watch sports all day, every day, that's all I will do. But looking forward to some NFL chatter months from now, but definitely NBA playoffs.
Mhm.
Probably checking on some baseball at some point. But always a pleasure doing the show with you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to all the listeners, viewers, guys that take time out of their day to watch the show. You guys are the absolute best. And we'll see you guys soon. Have a good one, Tom.